Imagine a sun-drenched Mediterranean island, strategically positioned, yet surprisingly empty. Why does Corsica, France's largest island, remain so sparsely populated, defying all expectations? When one pictures a large Mediterranean island, images of sun-drenched beaches, rolling hills of olive groves, and bustling port cities often come to mind. And when learning that Corsica, France's largest and most prominent island, sits in a strategic location between the populous coasts of France and Italy, one might expect it to be one of Europe's most developed places. Yet, Corsica, home to just 0.5% of France's total population, is largely empty. The primary and most striking clue to Corsica's emptiness isn't found in its census data or economy, but in its brutal yet magnificent geography. Despite being a relatively large island in one of the planet's most enviable regions, Corsica is home to just 355,000 people today. To put that in perspective, the nearby Italian island of Sardinia supports nearly 1.5 million people, and mainland France itself holds 69 million. This presents a unique geographic and demographic puzzle, suggesting that over thousands of years, far more people should have settled in Corsica. Unlike Sardinia or the French Riviera, however, Corsica is essentially a vast mountain range. An immense spine of granite and volcanic rock runs north to south, effectively dividing the island. This is no gentle range of hills. More than 120 peaks soar over 2,000 meters into the sky. The highest, Monte Cinto, tops out at a staggering 2,706 meters. This elevation surpasses any mountain in the British Isles, or the entire Appalachian Range of North America. This singular geographic reality profoundly shapes everything. This granite fortress dictates where, and if, people can live. There are few open plains suitable for agriculture, and no wide, gentle river valleys to host sprawling cities. The interior landscape is a natural fortress of sharp ridges, sheer cliffs, and deep, narrow gorges. Travel, even today, is slow and treacherous. A drive that might take an hour on the mainland can easily take 3 on Corsica's winding, clinging mountain roads. For centuries, it was often easier for a village on the west coast to trade by sea with Genoa or Marseille than to trade by land with a village just 48 kilometers inland. This verticality creates an island of extremes. While the coast sizzles in the Mediterranean sun, the high peaks are often capped with snow well into June. This results in a cascade of microclimates, from sandy beaches to alpine meadows. But few are conducive to large-scale, industrial-level farming. This land is best suited for goats, chestnut trees, and hardy olive groves terraced into impossibly steep hillsides. Yet, it is where the mountains meet the sea that the island's character is truly forged, for the coastline itself presents a second formidable barrier. If one were designing an island for large-scale development, it would feature wide sandy shores and large protected deep-water harbors. Corsica possesses almost none of these. The east coast is the most accommodating, a long, straight stretch of coast backed by plains. But for most of history, these plains were malarial swamps, perceived as places of disease and death, not opportunity. The west coast, by contrast, is a geological masterpiece and a human logistical nightmare. Here, mountains plunge directly into the sea in a dramatic clash of elements. This is home to the famous Calanques de Piana, a UNESCO World Heritage Site where wind and water have carved bright red granite into a forest of fantastical spires and sea caves. It is breathtakingly beautiful, yet utterly impossible to build a city upon. The few natural harbors are small and tucked into deep, fjord-like inlets, forming the basis for small towns like Ajaccio and other modest ports, but not sprawling metropolises. Beyond the mountains and coasts, another defining feature shapes Corsica, the Maquis. One cannot truly grasp the essence of Corsica without understanding the Maquis. It is the very scent of the island, an aromatic tidal wave that its most famous son, Napoleon Bonaparte, claimed he could smell from the sea upon his return from exile. But it is no gentle garden. The Maquis is a dense, thorny, and nearly impenetrable layer of scrubland that covers over half the island. It is a tangled mess of wild olive, myrtle, juniper, and thyme, growing several meters tall. While it can be beautiful, it is also fiercely hostile, a landscape that actively resists. Attempt to walk through it, and it will tear your clothes and skin. Try to clear it for farming, and it will exhaust you. This landscape is a fortress within a fortress, and this untamable wilderness would come to define the island's people and its history in ways they could not possibly have imagined. This untamed terrain set the stage for a brutal struggle for control that spanned thousands of years. If Corsica's geography is a fortress, its history is the chronicle of a fortress under permanent siege. The island's brutal, fragmented landscape did more than just isolate villages. It forged a people defined by the land's own untamable character, a story of being owned by everyone and truly belonging to no one. Humans first arrived on Corsica at least 9,000 years ago, Stone Age hunter-gatherers who crossed the sea and discovered a land of mountains and thick forest. But Corsica's written history begins, as it would continue for millennia, with foreigners. The ancient Greeks, arriving around 565 BCE, were the first to attempt colonization. They founded Alalia on the flat, marshy east coast and called the island Calliste, meaning the most beautiful. They were followed by the Etruscans and the Carthaginians, all scrambling for a strategic foothold in the Mediterranean. Yet, these great powers all made the same discovery. One could hold the port, but one could not hold the island. The interior, with its sheer mountains and impenetrable Maquis scrubland, remained the domain of the native tribes. Then came the Romans. They conquered the coastal settlements in 259 BCE, and, like the Greeks, largely confined themselves to the lowlands. For Rome, Corsica was not a jewel of the empire. It was a backwater, a place of exile, and a logging camp. They built a major base at Aleria, but the swamps bred malaria, and the mountains bred rebels. The Romans never truly pacified the interior. They simply contained it. It was during this period that the Corsican character, as we know it today, was truly forged. When the Roman Empire collapsed, Corsica descended into a dark age of chaos. The island became a target for any pirate or warlord with a boat. Vandals, Ostrogoths, and Saracens raided the coast relentlessly. For the island's inhabitants, the only viable survival strategy was to abandon the sea. They fled to the mountains, building their villages like eagles' nests on high, defensible ridges, invisible from the coast. This was the birth of the clan-based, fiercely insular, and honor-bound society. Separated by impassable valleys, each village became a mini-republic. Trust was given only to family and clan, and defense was a personal duty. This isolation bred a deep suspicion of outsiders and a complex system of personal justice known as the vendetta. The geography and the history were now working in perfect, terrible harmony. The land made them isolated, and the invasions made them distrustful. This chaotic vacuum was eventually filled by two competing Italian powers, Pisa and Genoa. For centuries, they fought for control, but by 1284, the Republic of Genoa had secured its prize. This marked the beginning of a 500-year relationship that would permanently scar the island and its people. Genoa did not rule Corsica as a province. It ruled it as a colony. The Genoese were masters, not partners. They built magnificent citadels and watchtowers on the coast, impressive fortresses like the one at Calvi, but these were not for protecting the Corsicans, they were for controlling them. The Genoese exploited the island, clear-cutting its forests for shipbuilding and imposing ruinous taxes, while doing nothing to develop the interior. Any rebellion was crushed with brutal efficiency. For the Corsicans, the Genoese were just the latest, most permanent invaders. Resentment simmered for centuries, erupting in constant, failed rebellions. The Maquis became a refuge for bandits and freedom fighters, who were often one and the same. But here's where the story takes a remarkable turn. In 1729, a final, island-wide rebellion exploded. This was not just another failed peasant uprising. It was a war of liberation. After decades of struggle, a leader emerged who would change everything. Pasquale Paoli. Returning from exile in 1755, Paoli did more than just lead an army. He united the warring clans and transformed a fractured society into a modern nation. He established the Corsican Republic, a sovereign state with its capital in the mountain heartland of Corte. Paoli founded a university, minted his own currency, and wrote a constitution. This document was one of the most democratic in the world at the time, a beacon of the Enlightenment that even granted some women the right to vote. Decades before the American or French revolutions, they had achieved the impossible. For 14 years, a free and independent Corsica existed, a testament to Paoli's genius and the people's relentless desire for liberty. And it was this very success that sealed their fate. The Republic of Genoa, broke and humiliated, finally admitted it had lost control, but it was not willing to grant Corsica its freedom. Instead, in 1768, Genoa made a cynical deal with the rising power of France. In the Treaty of Versailles, Genoa effectively sold its claim to the island to King Louis XV to pay off its debts. The French, eager for a strategic naval base, invaded. The Corsicans, who had just spent 40 years fighting one master, were now faced with a fresh, more powerful one. At the Battle of Ponte Novo in 1769, Paoli's exhausted army of patriots and mercenaries made their last stand against the professional soldiers of France. They were crushed. The Corsican Republic was over. Pasquale Paoli fled back into exile, and France annexed Corsica as a new province. That single act, a business transaction between two foreign powers, would define Corsica's destiny to this very day. Just a few months later, in the newly French town of Ajaccio, a woman from a minor noble family gave birth to a son, Napoleon Bonaparte. He would become the most famous Frenchman of all time, the ultimate irony for an island that had just been conquered. Corsica did not join France. It was taken. And it is this history that is the seed of everything that defines the island today. We have now established two fundamental truths about Corsica. First, its geography is a fortress, a vertical, mountainous, and impenetrable landscape that resists large-scale human settlement. Second, its history is a 2,000-year-long siege, culminating not in liberation, but in a forced sale to France. This is not the story of a region that naturally grew into a nation. It is the story of an island conquered. Yet, even with this understanding, a crucial question lingers. Why, centuries later, does Corsica remain so empty? Today, Corsica is a region of France, a modern European country. It is a place of staggering beauty, with a Mediterranean climate and coveted beaches. Why haven't the 69 million people of mainland France simply flooded in? Why hasn't this empty island been filled, just as the French Riviera or Provence were? The answer lies in the final and most important piece of the puzzle, the Corsican people themselves. In a culture so distinct and a sense of identity so fierce that it has, in effect, repelled the mainland. The mainland French never came because, in many ways, they were never truly welcome. To understand modern Corsica is to grasp this fundamental truth. Corsicans are Corsican first, and French second. This isn't a quaint regional quirk like the difference between a Parisian and a Provençal. It's a deep, foundational divide. The history of conquest, not union, is the single most important fact one needs to know. Corsicans refer to the French mainland not as an extension of Corsica, but as a separate entity altogether. And this identity is anchored in its own language. Corsican, or Corsu, is not a dialect of French. It's an Italo-Dalmatian language far closer to Tuscan Italian than to the French spoken in Paris. While French is the official language of government and commerce, Corsu is the language of the home, the village, and the culture. To speak, it is to draw a line in the sand, separating oneself from the French state and the mainlanders of France itself. This unique culture, forged in the isolated mountain valleys, is built on a different set of values. For centuries, loyalty was not to a distant king or a faceless government in Genoa or Paris. Loyalty was to the family and the clan. Justice was not sought from a state-appointed judge. It was taken, famously and brutally, through the vendetta. While the vendetta is now largely a relic, its legacy is a deep and abiding suspicion of the central state. This created a culture that is famously insular. It's one thing for a mainlander to visit as a tourist. It's another thing entirely to move in, open a business, and try to integrate. One will always be an outsider in Corsica. But here's where this cultural divide becomes a modern political firestorm. This passionate identity has fueled a powerful nationalist movement that has defined the island for the last 50 years. This movement exists on a spectrum. On one end are the moderates who demand greater autonomy from France, official recognition of the Corsican language, more local political control, and, most contentiously, new laws to restrict who can buy property on the island. This last point is crucial. Corsicans see their island, their ancestral land, being bought up as second homes by wealthy mainlanders and foreigners they will never meet. This colonization by the checkbook drives up prices, forces young Corsicans to move away for work, and threatens to turn the island into a hollowed-out seasonal theme park. At the other end of this spectrum lies a darker, more violent manifestation of Corsican nationalism. For decades, the National Liberation Front of Corsica waged a bombing campaign. Their targets were symbolic government buildings, police stations, and, most often, the partially built vacation homes of mainlanders. These attacks served as a violent, "I told you so," a message to Paris and to outsiders that Corsica is not just another piece of property. While the violence has waned since 2014, when the group announced a cessation of arms, this shadow of separatism hangs over the island, creating a political instability that is hardly an incentive for mass migration. This brings us back to our original question: why is Corsica so empty? The answer is a perfect storm of all three factors. Its geography made it a difficult place to build a large civilization from the start. Its history of invasion and conquest created a fiercely independent and insular culture. And today, that culture is actively fighting back against the very forces of money, migration, and homogenization that would otherwise fill it. Today, Corsica is home to just over 355,000 people, a far cry from France's 69 million. In fact, the single city of Nice, along the French Riviera, has just as many people. And Sardinia, the Italian island right next to it, boasts a whopping 1.5 million people. By all metrics, Corsica is practically empty, save for a proud culture determined to remain in their home.